She ran to the police for help, until the most feared man in the city walked into the station, met her eyes, and called her by the name she'd buried to survive. Before the story begins, tell me where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe. The police station smelled like disinfectant and old coffee, sharp, sterile, reassuring in the way only places built on rules ever were. Elena Voss nearly collapsed into it. The glass doors slid open with a soft, mechanical sigh, and she stumbled inside, breath tearing in and out of her chest. Her palms were slick with blood, some of it hers, some of it not, and one sleeve of her jacket hung ripped from shoulder to elbow. Her hair clung damply to her face, sweat and rain and fear blurring together until she couldn't tell which one burned her eyes. "Help!" she rasped. The word barely made it past her lips before her knees buckled. Hands caught her. Strong ones. Startled ones. Hey, easy," a male voice said as she was guided toward the front desk. "Ma'am, you're safe. You're in a police station." "Safe," the word echoed hollowly in her skull. She pressed her trembling hands flat against the cold counter, anchoring herself. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Radios crackled. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang. Normal sounds. Civilized sounds. Elena clung to them like a lifeline. "I need protection," she said, forcing each syllable out carefully. "They're looking for me." The desk sergeant, a man in his 40s with tired eyes and a coffee-stained uniform, studied her with immediate concern. "Who is they?" Elena swallowed hard. "I don't know their names," she lied, "but they won't stop." The sergeant motioned discreetly to an officer nearby. "Call this in. Medical too." A female officer appeared at her side, gently guiding her toward a chair. "You're bleeding. Can you tell me where you're hurt?" Elena shook her head. "Later, please, just don't let anyone in." The officer frowned slightly. "Ma'am, this is a secured building." Elena laughed, sharp and humorless. "So was the last place I hid," she said under her breath. Her pulse pounded in her ears as the sergeant slid a form toward her. "I need your name." For a split second her mind went blank. Names had always been dangerous. She forced herself to breathe evenly, slowly, carefully. "Elena," she said, then caught herself. Too fast. Too real. She corrected softer. Lena Carter." The lie tasted familiar, comfortable. She'd worn it like armor for years. The sergeant wrote it down, unaware that the truth sat like a loaded gun between them. "And what happened tonight, Ms. Carter?" he asked. Elena's gaze drifted to the glass doors behind her. Reflections stared back. Officers moving, a janitor pushing a mop, a city going about its night. She imagined headlights cutting through darkness, tires rolling slowly, men who didn't knock. "They found me," she said. "I thought I was careful. I thought I'd buried everything." "Everything?" the officer pressed. She shook her head. "I can't explain it all. Not yet." The sergeant exchanged a glance with another officer. "All right, we'll start with getting you somewhere private." A door buzzed open behind the desk. Elena flinched instinctively, heart slamming as the officer noticed. "Easy," he said. "Interview room." She nodded stiffly and followed, her footsteps echoing too loudly on the tile floor. Every shadow felt like movement. Every sound felt like pursuit. They guided her into a small room with a metal table and 2 chairs. A camera blinked red in the corner. The door closed with a solid click that reverberated in her chest. Locked. She exhaled shakily. For the first time in hours, maybe days, no one was chasing her. She pressed her forehead to the cool metal table, breathing through the tremors ripping through her body. She'd made it. She'd chosen the law, chosen rules, chosen protection that didn't come soaked in blood. She didn't hear the shift when it happened, didn't notice the sudden stillness beyond the glass, didn't see the way the desk sergeant straightened when a voice murmured something urgent into his ear, didn't know that somewhere outside, a black car had just pulled up to the curb. Elena closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer to a system she'd never trusted before tonight. Please, she thought. Let this be enough. She had no idea that safety was already walking through the front doors, and that the past she'd run from knew exactly where to find her. Officer Mark Jensen had the kind of face that suggested he'd seen everything and believed very little. He sat across from Elena at the metal table, notepad open, pen resting loosely between his fingers. His posture was relaxed, non-threatening by design, but his eyes were sharp, taking in details she hadn't meant to reveal. The tremor in her hands, the way she kept glancing toward the door, the dried blood along the seam of her sleeve. All right, he said calmly. Let's start again. Name? Elena lifted her chin. Lena Carter. The words slid out smoothly, too smoothly. They'd been rehearsed for years, spoken into mirrors, murmured to landlords, employers, doctors. Lena Carter had rented apartments, paid bills, disappeared into crowds. Lena Carter had survived. Mark Jensen wrote it down without comment. And how long have you been using that name? He asked casually, eyes still on the page. Elena's stomach tightened. Since tonight, she said quickly. His pen paused. She cursed herself internally and forced her shoulders to relax. I mean, she corrected, since I needed it? Jensen leaned back in his chair, studying her openly now. People don't usually come in bleeding and ask for protection under a brand new name. Elena met his gaze, heart pounding. People who are being hunted don't usually have the luxury of paperwork. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. Fair, he said. He flipped a page. Date of birth? She gave him one that wasn't hers. Place of residence? She listed an address she'd memorized months ago, a studio she'd left behind 2 cities, and 1 close call earlier. Each lie fit neatly into place, forming a version of herself that had no loose threads to pull. Jensen listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, scribbling notes. Too calm, too patient. 5 years, he said eventually, tapping the pen against the paper. That's a long time to be running. Elena stiffened. I didn't say I was running. He lifted an eyebrow. You didn't have to. She exhaled slowly through her nose, choosing her next words with care. I witnessed something I wasn't supposed to. I stayed quiet. That wasn't enough. Jensen studied her for a long moment, then stood. I'm going to step out for a minute. Panic flared. Why? To verify a few things. Her nails dug into her palms. Verify what? That Lena Carter exists, he said simply. The door opened, closed, locked. Elena's pulse thundered. 5 years. 5 cities. 5 different lives shed like skin. Every time she gave that name, she gambled that no one would look too closely. She pressed her hands flat on the table, grounding herself, breathing through the spiral of panic. The name was clean. It always had been. Except tonight it felt thin. The door opened again sooner than she expected. Jensen stepped back inside, expression unreadable. He sat slowly, placing the notepad down. There's Elena Carter, he said. She's real. She's got a driver's license, rental history, a job record. Relief flooded her so fast her vision swam. But, he continued, she's not bleeding in my interview room. Her chest tightened. And, he added, voice lowering, she didn't disappear from a different city 2 hours ago after someone tore apart her apartment. Elena's heart stuttered. I didn't say... No, Jensen interrupted gently. You didn't. He leaned forward now, elbows on the table. Lena, whoever you really are, you're scared for a reason. And pretending otherwise won't help you here. She swallowed hard. You said I was safe. I said you were in a police station, he replied. That's not always the same thing. A chill crept up her spine. Mark? A voice called softly from outside the door. Jensen didn't take his eyes off Elena as he answered. Yeah? Captain wants a word. Jensen nodded once. I'll be right there. He stood, hesitated, then spoke quietly. "One more thing." She looked up at him. "You've been Lena Carter for 5 years," he said. "That tells me 2 things." Her throat felt tight. "What?" "1, you're good at surviving." He straightened. "And 2, someone very dangerous is still looking for the woman you were before." The door closed behind him, leaving Elena alone with the lie that had saved her life and the creeping realization that tonight it might finally fail her. The interview room was smaller than the front desk area, windowless except for a single pane of reinforced glass that looked out into a dim observation space. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale, unforgiving glow. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Detective Sarah Coleman closed the door behind them. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed louder than it should have. Elena felt it in her chest, sharp, immediate, and then something unexpected followed. Relief. Her shoulders sagged before she could stop them. The adrenaline that had kept her upright since she'd burst through the station doors finally loosened its grip. Her knees felt weak. Her breath came out in a long, shaky exhale she hadn't realized she'd been holding for hours. Sarah noticed. "Sit," she said gently, pulling out a chair for herself, but waiting until Elena lowered into the metal one opposite her. Elena obeyed. The chair was cold, hard, real. The table between them scarred with old scratches and faint burn marks. Nothing luxurious, nothing threatening. Safe. For the first time in years, the walls around her felt solid. Sarah didn't rush. She placed a recorder on the table but didn't turn it on. Instead, she slid a paper cup of water toward Elena and watched her with the kind of steady attention that wasn't predatory, but wasn't kind either. "You can breathe now," Sarah said quietly. Elena laughed once, a brittle sound. "That obvious?" "You walked in here like someone expecting a bullet in the back," Sarah replied. "People don't fake that." Elena wrapped both hands around the cup, letting the cold seep into her palms. Her fingers were still trembling. "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted. Sarah nodded. "That's usually why people come here." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, not awkward. Just present. Elena's chest rose and fell more evenly now. The lock on the door mattered more than she wanted to admit. A barrier she didn't have to watch. A line someone else was responsible for guarding. "How long has it been?" Sarah asked eventually. Elena frowned. "Since what?" "Since you last felt safe enough to sit down like that?" Sarah said, nodding at her posture, curled inward, protective, but no longer poised to bolt. Elena stared at the tabletop. The answer came before she could stop it. 5 years. Sarah didn't react. That was what made her dangerous in a different way than the men Elena was running from. She didn't pounce. She didn't flinch. She waited. "I stopped counting after the first year," Elena added softly. "It was easier that way." Sarah reached into a folder and slid a clean cloth across the table. "You're bleeding." Elena glanced down, surprised. A thin line of red had seeped through her sleeve again. She must have reopened the cut when she slammed into the front desk earlier. She pressed the cloth to it without comment. "Tell me what happened tonight," Sarah said. Elena hesitated. Every instinct screamed to deflect, to soften the edges, to tell a version of the truth that couldn't be traced back to the real one. But the door was locked, and for the first time in years, no one was watching her through tinted glass or a rearview mirror. "They found me," she said quietly. Sarah's pen stilled. "Who?" Elena shook her head. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because names make things real," Elena replied. "And once they're real, they don't stay contained." Sarah studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "All right, then tell me how." Elena closed her eyes. The images came back instantly. Too sharp, too vivid. The scrape of boots on concrete, the sound of her door splintering. A voice she recognized even after all this time, low and amused, like nothing had changed. I was home, she said. I heard them before I saw them. That's why I ran. Alone? Yes. No one else at risk? Elena's jaw tightened. No. It was the only lie she allowed herself tonight. Sarah wrote something down but didn't press. You did the right thing coming here, she said instead. Elena's lips trembled. I don't know if that's true. Sarah leaned back in her chair. People like the ones you're afraid of, they thrive on isolation, on keeping you moving, tired, quiet. She met Elena's eyes directly now. Walking into a police station and asking for help? Sarah continued. That's not weakness, that's disruption. Elena swallowed hard. Behind the glass, the observation room was dark, empty, as far as she could tell. No shadows moved. No silhouettes leaned in. For the first time in 5 years, Elena let herself lean back in the chair and close her eyes. Not in surrender, but in something dangerously close to trust. She didn't know it yet, but the moment she took that breath, everything she'd been running from was already on its way inside. It began as a ripple, not loud, not dramatic. Just a subtle change in the station's rhythm, like a breath being held without anyone announcing it. The constant murmur of radios softened. Laughter near the vending machines died mid-sentence. Chairs scraped as officers straightened instinctively, hands drifting closer to belts they hadn't touched seconds before. Elena felt it before she understood it. She was mid-sentence when Sarah's gaze flicked past her shoulder, sharp, assessing, and then stilled. Not alarmed, not curious, aware. What is it? Elena asked quietly. Sarah didn't answer right away. She rose from her chair and moved to the door, opening it just enough to look through the narrow window into the hall. Her posture changed as she did. Spine straighter, shoulders squared, like someone preparing to stand in a current rather than against it. Outside the interview room, the station was still. Too still. Elena's pulse began to climb. Sarah? She pressed. The detective closed the door gently behind her and returned to the table, but something in her expression had shifted. The calm was still there, but it had hardened, focused, purposeful. Do you hear that? Sarah asked. Elena strained. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, tires rolling to a stop. Not hurried, not sloppy. Smooth, controlled. A door opening, another closing. The sound carried through the building like a low note struck on a cello, felt more than heard. Someone important had arrived. The radios crackled once, then lowered in volume across the room as if on instinct. No orders barked, no announcements made, just quiet coordination, unspoken and immediate. Elena's stomach tightened painfully. I need you to stay here, Sarah said, voice level. Don't open the door for anyone unless I come back. Elena nodded, though her hands had curled into fists beneath the table. Sarah reached the door, paused, and looked back at her. Whatever happens next, she added carefully, this station is still on your side. Then she left. The lock clicked again. Elena sat alone, staring at the glass. At first she saw nothing. Just her own pale reflection, hair tangled, blood dark against her sleeve. Then shadows moved. Shapes passed through the corridor outside the interview room. Their pace altered, their posture unmistakably alert. A man walked past the glass, then another. Not cops. Not exactly. They wore suits beneath their coats. Dark, tailored, expensive in a way that didn't beg for attention. Their eyes scanned corners, exits, angles. Professionals. The kind that didn't need to announce authority to wield it. Elena's breath went shallow. She knew that walk, knew the stillness in their movements, the way they took up space without apology. Her fingers trembled as a memory surfaced unbidden. A different city, a different night. a black car idling too quietly outside her building. A promise whispered into a phone she'd thrown away hours later. Run. Don't look back. The front doors of the station opened. Even through reinforced walls, Elena felt it. The air changed. Conversation died completely now. Officers stood. Someone cleared their throat and stopped. A desk sergeant straightened papers that didn't need straightening. Then he walked in. Elena didn't see his face, not yet, but she knew him anyway. She felt him the way prey feels a predator step into the clearing. Not because of noise, because of gravity. He moved through the station as if it had already been measured and approved, as if he belonged there, not as a guest, not as a threat, as a fact. No one stopped him. A captain appeared at his side, murmuring something Elena couldn't hear. The man inclined his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge the courtesy. His gaze lifted, and through the glass, for a split second. Their eyes met. Elena's heart slammed so hard it stole her breath. 5 years vanished. The name she'd buried. The city she'd fled. The man she had loved. And escaped. He hadn't changed. If anything, he looked more controlled now. Dark hair neatly combed back. Expression unreadable. A tailored coat draped over his shoulders, like an extension of his will. But his eyes were exactly the same, and they were on her. Elena lurched back from the table, chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her pulse roared in her ears, drowning out everything else. No, she whispered. No, no, no. The man didn't move closer. He didn't need to. He spoke quietly to the captain, then turned away, continuing down the hall as if the sight of her hadn't just detonated her world. But Elena knew better. Because just before he disappeared from view, his jaw tightened. Just slightly. Recognition. Whatever safety she'd found behind locked doors and good intentions had just fractured. The law hadn't failed her. It had simply been outmatched. And somewhere in the station, walking calmly through corridors meant to protect people like her, was the man she'd been running from. Or the man she'd never escaped at all. No one reached for handcuffs. That was the first thing Elena noticed. The second was the way Captain Ruiz stepped forward, not hurried, not stiff, but measured, like a man greeting a storm he'd already decided not to fight. "Mr. Moretti," Ruiz said, extending a hand. "Didn't expect to see you tonight." Alessandro Moretti took it briefly, firm, polite, finished before it could become familiar. "Captain," Sandro replied. His voice was low, smooth, carrying easily without being raised. "I apologize for the hour." "You're not interrupting anything," Ruiz said automatically. It was a lie. Everyone knew it. No one challenged it. Sandro's gaze drifted through the station. Not curious, not impressed. Evaluating. As if he were walking through a building he might one day own, and was noting structural weaknesses out of habit. Officers stood straighter as he passed. Some nodded. Some looked away. A few, too young, too new, stared openly until a sharp look from a superior corrected them. No one stopped him. Not because they couldn't. Because they didn't. Elena watched from behind the glass, her body locked somewhere between flight and collapse. The room felt too small now. Too thin. As if the walls were only pretending to exist. 5 years. 5 years of running, of sleeping light, of changing her hair, her name, her voice when she spoke to strangers. And he walked into a police station like a man arriving at his own dinner party. Sandro paused near the front desk, coat still on, hands empty and visible. Not a show of compliance, an assertion. He didn't need to hide anything. "Someone came in tonight asking for protection," he said calmly. Ruiz's expression didn't change. "A lot of people come in asking for protection." Sandro smiled faintly. Not warmth, not humor. Recognition. "Yes," he said. but only one of them used a name she hasn't answered to in years. The air thickened. Elena's breath caught painfully in her chest. Ruiz glanced toward the hallway that led to the interview rooms. Just for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Sandro followed the look. There she is, he murmured, still running. Mr. Moretti, Ruiz said carefully, if you're here about a civilian. I'm here about a woman who disappeared from my life without explanation, Sandro replied, and who walked into your station bleeding tonight because someone found her. Ruiz held his ground. That doesn't give you jurisdiction. Sandro tilted his head. No, it gives me interest. Interest. The word landed heavier than any threat. Ruiz folded his arms. She asked for protection. And she has it, Sandro said smoothly. From you. From me. From whoever thought chasing her was a good idea. Ruiz frowned. You're assuming... I don't assume, Sandro interrupted gently. I confirm. He turned slightly, addressing the room without raising his voice. Whoever followed Elena Voss here tonight, he said, using her real name like a blade slid slowly from its sheath, has already been identified. Murmurs rippled. Elena's knees went weak. He made a mistake, Sandro continued. He confused distance with safety, and silence with permission. Ruiz's jaw tightened. This is a police station. Sandro met his eyes. Exactly. The implication was unmistakable. This place was no longer neutral ground. Ruiz exhaled slowly. You can't see her. Sandro didn't argue. I'm not here to take her, he said. I'm here to make sure she lives through the night. A beat. And to let her know, he added quietly, that pretending I don't exist is no longer an option. Behind the glass, Elena pressed her hand to her mouth to keep the sound in. Sandro took one step toward the hallway. Ruiz moved with him, not blocking but matching pace. You understand, Ruiz said lowly, that if you cross a line... I won't, Sandro replied. I never do. That was the most frightening part. He stopped just short of the interview room door. The glass reflected his image now, sharp, composed, inevitable. He didn't knock. He didn't need to. Elena, he said, voice carrying through reinforced walls and 5 years of distance. You can keep hiding behind the law if you want. Her heart shattered at the sound of her name on his lips. But don't confuse their protection, he continued calmly, with distance from me. Silence swallowed the station. For the first time since she ran, Elena understood the truth she'd been avoiding. The law hadn't stopped Alessandro Moretti. It had only delayed him. The glass between them felt thinner than it had a moment ago. Elena stood frozen behind it, palms flat against the edge of the table, breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat. She could feel every eye in the station turning, slowly, instinctively, toward the interview room, toward her, toward the moment that was unfolding, whether she was ready or not. Sandro didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Elena Voss, he said calmly. Her name didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed heavy and final, like a verdict delivered without ceremony. You shouldn't have run this far. The room went dead still. Not quiet, still. Radios stopped crackling. Pens paused mid-scratch. Someone near the front desk inhaled sharply and forgot to exhale. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to fade beneath the weight of those words. Elena felt it like a physical blow. 5 years of careful distance collapsed into nothing. She turned slowly, every movement deliberate, as if sudden motion might shatter her completely. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, pale, wide-eyed, bleeding through a sleeve she'd forgotten to change. She looked nothing like the woman she'd been when she ran, and everything like the woman he remembered. Sarah Coleman appeared at her side, a steady presence, one hand hovering near Elena's elbow, without touching. Support, without possession. That's not her name, Sarah said evenly, though the tension in her voice betrayed her. Sandro's gaze never left Elena. "No," he replied. "It's the one she answers to when she stops pretending." Elena swallowed hard. Her mouth was dry, her tongue heavy. "Don't," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was speaking to anymore. "Please." Sandro's expression shifted, not softened, not hardened, but sharpened, like a blade finally uncovered. "You walked into a police station," he said, voice still calm, still controlled. "Bleeding, afraid. And you thought the law would keep you safe from a world you already know doesn't respect it." He took a step closer to the glass. Officers shifted uneasily. Captain Ruiz's jaw tightened, but he didn't move to stop him. "You didn't come here because you trusted them," Sandro continued. "You came here because you ran out of places to hide." Elena's chest ached. "I came here because I was being hunted," she said, louder now, forcing the words out. "And because I didn't want to die." A murmur rippled through the room. Sandro studied her like he was memorizing the damage. "And did you think disappearing from my life," he asked quietly, "would make that any less true?" Sarah stepped forward then, placing herself half a step between Elena and the glass. "This is enough," she said firmly. "She's under our protection." Sandro finally looked at her. The weight of his attention was immediate. "Detective," he said politely, "if I wanted her taken from this room, you would already be explaining paperwork to your captain." Sarah didn't flinch. "And if you threaten her—" "I'm not here to threaten her," Sandro interrupted. "I'm here because someone else already did." That landed. Elena's knees went weak, and she reached back instinctively, fingers curling around the edge of the chair to steady herself. Sandro turned back to her. "5 years ago," he said, voice lower now, rougher around the edges. "You vanished without a word. No note, no warning. One day you were there. The next, gone." Elena's vision blurred. "I did what I had to," she said hoarsely. "And so did I," Sandro replied. The silence stretched tight between them. "You changed your name," he continued. "Your hair, your cities. You erased yourself piece by piece." He tilted his head slightly, "But you kept your eyes." Her breath hitched. "I recognized you the moment I walked in," he said. "Not because of a file, not because of a trace." A beat. "Because you still look at danger the same way." The room seemed to lean in. Elena shook her head, tears burning hot behind her eyes. "You don't get to say my name like that. Not after everything." Sandro's jaw clenched. "I get to say it," he said quietly, "because it's mine to remember." Every officer in the room felt it. The history, the gravity, the unfinished business crackling in the air like a live wire. Sandro stepped back at last, giving her space he hadn't offered before. "You shouldn't have run this far," he repeated softer now, "because the only thing you've done is bring the past into a building full of witnesses." Elena realized then, too late, that whatever protection she'd found behind locked doors had just turned into a stage. And every person in that station had just learned one dangerous truth. Elena Voss wasn't just a woman asking for help. She was a name powerful enough to make Alessandro Moretti walk into a police station and walk out unchanged. The questions came fast after that. Too fast, too loud, too late. Captain Ruiz stepped forward, voice sharp now, no longer diplomatic. "Mr. Moretti, you don't get to walk in here, name a civilian, and turn my station upside down without explaining why." Several officers shifted closer. Not aggressive. Not yet. But present. A reminder that this was still a police station. Rules, procedure, authority backed by law. Sandro Moretti didn't look at them. He looked at Elena, and that alone told everyone in the room exactly how little their posture mattered. "She came here for protection," Ruiz continued. "If you know something that puts her at risk, you're obligated to—" "I'm obligated to nothing," Sandro said calmly. The interruption wasn't sharp. It wasn't loud. It was worse. Absolute. Every sound in the station seemed to dull around his voice. Sandro finally turned, slow and deliberate, his gaze sweeping the officers now gathered like he was counting exits rather than people. "You're asking me for answers," he said. "That tells me you're already behind." Ruiz bristled. "This is an active situation." "Yes," Sandro agreed, "and you are not equipped for it." A ripple of anger moved through the room. Sarah Coleman stepped in before it could break. "If she's in danger," she said firmly, "then tell us who from. Give us something to work with." Sandro considered her. Really considered her. Not dismissive. Not impressed. "Detective," he said. "If I give you names, you'll start paperwork. You'll issue alerts. You'll make noise." He paused. "And the men who want her dead will hear it before you finish your first report." Elena's stomach twisted. Ruiz crossed his arms. "So what? You expect us to hand her over to you?" Sandro's eyes snapped back to him, sharp as cut glass. "No," he said. "I expect you to understand that your walls are already compromised." That landed like a dropped weapon. "What does that mean?" Ruiz demanded. "It means," Sandro replied evenly, "that whoever followed her here knew she'd come to you. Which means someone is watching this building. Which means every minute she stays inside, she becomes easier to track." A low murmur spread through the officers. Elena's breath came shallow. She looked around suddenly, the station no longer feeling solid, just exposed. Glass, doors, cameras she didn't control. Sarah frowned. "You're saying she's safer with you than here?" Sandro didn't hesitate. "I'm saying she's alive because I came when I did." That silence again, thick, uncomfortable. Ruiz shook his head. "You don't get to dictate security inside my precinct." Sandro stepped closer, not aggressive, not hurried, just enough that Ruiz had to tilt his head up slightly to maintain eye contact. "I'm not dictating," Sandro said quietly. "I'm informing." He lowered his voice, not to hide it, but to make sure it carried only as far as it needed to. "The men who are looking for Elena don't respect warrants," he continued. "They don't care about jurisdiction, and they don't stop at doors with badges on them." Elena flinched. "They will wait," Sandro went on, "until she leaves this building, or until someone here makes a mistake." Sarah looked at Elena then, really looked at her, and something in her expression shifted. Fear. Not for herself. For Elena. "What happens if she stays?" Sarah asked quietly. Sandro met her gaze. "Then tonight ends badly. And tomorrow, you'll be explaining to Internal Affairs how a woman under your protection was taken from your custody." Ruiz's jaw clenched hard enough Elena thought it might crack. "This sounds like a threat," he said. Sandro's mouth curved faintly. Not a smile. "It's a warning," he corrected. "There's a difference." He turned back to Elena then, ignoring everyone else, as if they were furniture. "You didn't come here to be brave," he said softly. "You came here because you were out of moves." Elena swallowed. "I came here because I thought it was safe." "And it was," Sandro replied, "until your name was spoken out loud." The weight of that pressed down on her chest. "I won't force you," he added, voice low, controlled. "But understand this. Inside these walls, you are visible. Outside them, you are protected." Ruiz exploded. "By what? Your word?" Sandro finally looked back at him. "Yes." One word. No embellishment. No explanation. Just certainty. And in the awful, telling silence that followed, every officer in the room understood the truth, even if none of them would ever say it out loud. Alessandro Moretti didn't need a badge to command the room. He already owned the outcome. And Elena, standing in the center of it all, realized with a sickening clarity that safety had never been about where she ran. It had always been about who was willing to stand between her and the men who wanted her gone. And Sandro had just made it clear. The police station was no longer that place. The memory came back the way it always did, without warning, without mercy. One moment, Elena was standing under fluorescent lights, heart pounding, the echo of Sandro's voice still vibrating through her bones. The next, she was somewhere else entirely. Rain. Heavy, relentless rain that soaked through her coat and plastered her hair to her face as she cut through an alley she shouldn't have taken. She remembered thinking it would save her 5 minutes. She remembered being annoyed at herself for not calling a cab. She remembered the sound. A sharp crack. Too loud to be a car backfiring. Too controlled to be an accident. Elena froze in the shadow of a dumpster, breath caught in her throat. Ahead, the alley widened just enough to reveal a black SUV idling at an angle it shouldn't have been. One door stood open. Men's voices carried through the rain, low, tense, impatient. "Do it already!" Another voice answered, calm and bored. "He made his choice." Elena should have turned around. She knew that. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Instead, she took one step closer. That mistake had rewritten her life. She saw the man on his knees, hands bound, suit ruined by rain and blood. His face was bruised beyond recognition, but his eyes were wide and desperate, flicking between the men standing over him like he was still hoping for mercy. He said a name, not Sandro's. A rival's. A family everyone in that world feared because they didn't negotiate. They erased. "Elena," the voice from the present whispered. She blinked. For a heartbeat, the police station and the alley overlapped. Sterile walls bleeding into brick, slick with rain, the hum of lights blending with the echo of a gunshot. The man in the alley begged. The gun lifted. Elena turned away a split second too late. The sound punched through her chest anyway. She ran. She didn't scream. She didn't think. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs shook, until she was vomiting in the street 2 blocks away, hands braced against a lamppost as the world spun. She didn't know then that someone had seen her. She didn't know that a witness, even an accidental one, wasn't just inconvenient. It was leverage. The threat started 2 days later. A note slipped under her apartment door. No name, no signature, just a single sentence written in neat, deliberate handwriting. "You were never there." She packed that night. She didn't tell Sandro. That was the part people never understood. She loved him. God, she loved him. He was fire and gravity and certainty in a world that had always felt unstable. Being with him felt like standing inside a fortress. And that was exactly why she ran. Because the second message came with proof. A photo taken from across the street. Her entering his building, his hand on her back. Her face turned up toward him, smiling. The message beneath it was shorter. "We know who you are to him." That was when fear stopped being abstract. That was when it became strategic. Elena disappeared before dawn. She changed her phone, her name, her hair. She crossed state lines like they were meaningless, sleeping in places that didn't ask questions, taking jobs that paid cash, learning how to exist without being seen. She told herself Sandro was safer not knowing. Because if she told him, they wouldn't kill her. They'd wait. They'd use her. They'd use her to make him bleed. The memory fractured, releasing her back into the present with a sharp inhale that burned her throat. She was shaking. Sarah Coleman sat across from her now, eyes intent, silent, letting the truth spill without interruption. "That's why I ran," Elena said hoarsely. "Not because of him, because of what being close to him would cost." Outside the interview room, voices moved. Doors opened and closed. The station breathed around them. "And tonight?" Sarah asked quietly. Elena swallowed. "They found me again?" Sarah nodded once, grim. "You didn't imagine it." Elena laughed weakly. "I never do." Her gaze drifted toward the hallway, toward the man she had loved enough to leave and feared enough to run from. "I wasn't running from Sandro," she said. "I was running from becoming the reason someone killed him." The truth settled heavy in the room. And somewhere beyond the glass, Alessandro Moretti waited, unaware that the distance Elena had put between them had never been about escaping him. It had been about surviving his enemies. Sandro didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The station had settled into a tense, watchful quiet, like a room full of people holding their breath in unison. Officers lingered near doorways, radios muted but alive in their hands. Captain Ruiz stood near the front desk, jaw tight, eyes flicking between Sandro and the corridor that led to the interview rooms. Sandro remained exactly where he was, still, composed, dangerous in his restraint. "I'm not here to make a spectacle," he said at last, breaking the silence, "and I'm not here to drag anyone out of your custody." Ruiz crossed his arms. "Then why are you here?" Sandro's gaze shifted just slightly toward the interview room. "Because," he replied, "someone put hands on Elena." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Ruiz frowned. "You don't know that." "I do," Sandro said calmly. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and removed his phone. Not hurried, not dramatic. He placed it face up on the counter between them and tapped the screen once. A still image filled the display. Elena, captured on a grainy security camera near her apartment building. The timestamp burned white in the corner. A shadowed figure stood too close behind her. Hand gripping her arm, fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. Several officers leaned in despite themselves. Ruiz's mouth tightened. "Where did you get this?" Sandro didn't answer the question directly. "She didn't come here because she panicked," he said. "She came here because someone made a move. That broke a rule." "What rule?" Sarah Coleman asked from the edge of the group. Sandro finally looked at her. "The one that keeps people breathing." He slid the phone away. "For 5 years," he continued, "Elena was left alone. Watched, yes. Tracked, maybe. But untouched." Elena's chest tightened behind the glass. "They knew better," Sandro went on. "They understood that if anything happened to her, the consequences would be disproportionate." Ruiz scoffed quietly. "You're saying she was under your protection all this time?" Sandro's jaw flexed. "I'm saying she was off limits." "Then why now?" Ruiz pressed. Sandro's eyes hardened. "Because someone new got impatient," he said. "Or stupid." A murmur rippled through the station. Elena remembered the hand on her arm, the pressure, the familiarity of the fear that followed. Sandro turned his attention back to the glass. "I didn't come to expose you," he said, voice carrying clearly now. "I didn't come to question your choices." Elena flinched at the tenderness threading his tone despite the steel beneath it. "I came because someone decided they could scare you into silence again," he continued. "And I don't allow repeats." Sarah's brow furrowed. "You don't allow—" "I don't allow it," Sandro repeated more firmly. Ruiz stepped closer. "This isn't how justice works." Sandro met his gaze without blinking. "No, it's how survival works." He turned slightly, addressing the room as a whole. "Elena isn't leverage," he said. "She isn't bait, and she is no one's warning shot." His eyes swept across every uniform, every face. "Anyone who tries to make her one will disappear so thoroughly your reports will call it a clerical error." The threat wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The station absorbed it like a bruise forming under skin. Behind the glass, Elena's breath hitched. She hated how much of her felt steadied by his certainty. Hated how the fear receded just enough to let something else rise. Safety. Not kindness. Not forgiveness. Protection. Sandro looked at her again. Really looked this time. "You didn't run because you were weak," he said quietly. "You ran because you understood the rules better than anyone else in that alley." Her eyes burned. "And the moment someone broke them," he added, "I came." The weight of that settled deep in her chest. Sarah spoke softly. What happens now? Sandro exhaled slowly. Now, he said, everyone remembers why Elena was left alone. He reached for his coat, already turning away from the counter. I'll handle the men who touched her, he continued. You'll handle the paperwork. Ruiz clenched his jaw. You can't expect us to... I don't expect anything, Sandro replied over his shoulder. I ensure outcomes. He stopped once more, glancing back toward the interview room. Elena, he said, voice low, meant only for her. Protection was never mercy. The words lingered long after he moved away, and for the first time since she ran, Elena understood something terrifying and undeniable. The reason she was still alive had never been chance. It had been Alessandro Moretti's patience, and someone had finally exhausted it. The interview room felt smaller now, not because the walls had moved, but because the choice had. Elena sat with her hands wrapped around a paper cup that had long since gone cold. The water inside trembled faintly with every shift of her breathing. Across from her, Detective Sarah Coleman leaned back in her chair, arms folded, not closed, not defensive, but steady. Patient. Waiting. You can stay, Sarah said quietly. We can put you into protective custody tonight. The words were calm, reasonable, wrapped in policy and procedure. Elena looked up. Tonight? Sarah nodded. A safe location. Officers posted. No contact with anyone outside this room unless we clear it. And after tonight? Elena asked. Sarah hesitated. Just a fraction. Then we talk about relocation, she said. New documents. A longer-term plan. Elena almost laughed. She knew that language, had lived inside it once before. The maybes, the if-thens, the hope that systems could outpace men who didn't need permission. Witness protection? Elena asked softly. Sarah didn't correct her. That was answer enough. It works, Sarah said. Not perfectly, but it works. Elena's gaze drifted to the glass, to the hallway beyond it, to where Sandro had stood earlier, unmoved by locks, by uniforms, by rules. And if I don't? Elena asked. Sarah followed her gaze. Then you walk out of here with him. Elena swallowed. And you believe that's safer? Sarah pressed. I believe, Elena said carefully, that it's different. Sarah leaned forward. Elena, listen to me. Alessandro Moretti is not accountable to anyone. Not courts, not oversight, not consequences. Elena met her eyes. Neither are the men who are coming for me. That landed harder than Elena expected. Sarah exhaled slowly. If you stay with us, there are protocols, interrogations, statements. You'll need to give us everything you know. Elena nodded faintly. I figured. And if you go with him, Sarah continued, you'll disappear again, just under a different kind of shadow. Elena closed her eyes, because that was the truth she'd been avoiding. The door opened quietly. Sandro stepped in without invitation, without apology. No one stopped him. He didn't sit. He didn't crowd her. He remained standing near the wall, hands loose at his sides, posture relaxed in a way that felt coiled rather than casual. I won't interrogate you, he said calmly. Sarah shot him a sharp look. This is a police interview. I know, Sandro replied. That's why I'm offering an alternative. Elena's heart kicked hard in her chest. Sandro looked at her now, not accusing, not demanding. Honest. You can stay here, he said. Answer questions. Trust that procedures will protect you. He paused. Or you can leave with me, he continued. Tonight, no statements, no files, no names spoken out loud. Sarah bristled. That's not protection. That's control. Sandro didn't deny it. That's survival, he said instead. Elena's fingers curled tighter around the cup. What happens if I go with you? She asked quietly. Sandro didn't sugarcoat it. You won't be invisible, he said, but you won't be reachable either. And the men who followed me? She asked. They won't get a second chance, Sandro replied. Sarah leaned forward sharply. You're asking her to trust a man whose enemies put her in danger in the first place. Sandro turned to her, eyes cold now. No, he said. I'm asking her to trust the only man who stopped them from touching her for 5 years. Silence slammed into the room. Elena's breath came shallow. 5 years of running. 5 years of silence. 5 years of choosing distance over truth. Both paths in front of her demanded the same thing now. Trust. She looked at Sarah. The badge. The rules. The promise of protection that depended on systems and timing and people doing their jobs correctly. Then she looked at Sandro. The certainty. The danger. The promise that no one would ever mistake her for leverage again. If I stay, Elena said slowly, I become a witness. Sarah nodded. Yes. And if I go, Elena continued, I become a liability. Sandro shook his head once. You become mine. The word settled deep, heavy, possessive, honest. Elena stood. Her legs trembled, but she stayed upright. I didn't come here looking for mercy, she said quietly. I came because I was out of places to run. She turned to Sarah. You can protect me inside your walls. Sarah held her gaze. Yes. Elena turned to Sandro. And you? She asked. Sandro didn't hesitate. I will end this, he said, completely. Elena closed her eyes for a heartbeat. When she opened them, her choice was already made. Give me a minute, she said softly. Alone. Sarah hesitated. Sandro didn't. He stepped back without a word. Elena stood between them, law and survival, order and certainty, knowing that whichever path she chose would burn every bridge behind her. And this time, she would choose with her eyes open. The sound came first. Not the explosion itself, just the pressure change. A sudden, unnatural hush that swept through the station like a held breath, sharp enough that Elena felt it in her teeth. Then the windows rattled. Not shattered. Not yet. Just a violent shudder that sent a ripple through the glass walls and made several officers instinctively reach for weapons they weren't allowed to draw inside the building. What was that? Someone barked. Before anyone could answer, a radio screamed to life. Vehicle breach! Repeat! Vehicle breach at the west side! The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Sandro was already moving. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He simply shifted position. One step, then another, placing himself between Elena and the door without touching her, his body angling instinctively toward the sound. Lights, he said quietly. The overhead fluorescence flickered once. Twice. Then half the station dropped into emergency mode. Red strobes flashed. Alarms wailed. Not evacuation alarms, but controlled alerts meant to lock doors, restrict access, funnel movement. Protocols designed for riots and disasters. Not this. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. Sarah was on her feet now, radio pressed to her shoulder. All units, hold positions. Nobody leaves the building. A mistake. Sandro's jaw tightened. No, he said sharply. They want you contained. Another impact shook the building, closer this time. A concussive thud that sent a spiderweb crack racing across one of the front windows. Shouts erupted near the entrance. Elena flinched as a gunshot cracked outside. Not inside. Yet. They're not coming in, Sandro said calmly. They don't need to. Sarah turned to him. What does that mean? It means, he replied, eyes scanning the ceiling, the exits, the glass. They're reminding you that this place has edges. Another radio flared to life. Shots fired across the street, suspects using civilians as cover. A scream cut through the transmission. Elena's knees went weak. "They're staging it," she whispered. "They're making it public." Sandro looked at her then, not surprised. "Yes," he said. "Witnesses make power." Outside, chaos spread. Car alarms shrieked, tires screeched. Someone pounded on the front doors of the station, shouting to be let in. Ruiz appeared at the end of the hall, face pale. "We've got injured civilians across the street. They're trying to draw us out." "Of course they are," Sandro replied. "If you move officers, your perimeter weakens. If you don't, people bleed on camera." Sarah swore under her breath. "This is a trap." Sandro nodded once. It always was. Another gunshot rang out, closer now. The sound snapped through Elena's nerves like a whip. She pressed her hands flat against the table, breath coming too fast. "This is because of me," she said hoarsely. "No," Sandro said immediately. "This is because they thought fear would make me hesitate." The lights flickered again. This time, several went out entirely. The station plunged into a stuttering half-darkness, red emergency lights casting everything in jagged shadows. And in that light, Elena saw it clearly. The police station, the place she'd run to believing it was solid, neutral, safe, was just another stage. Glass walls, predictable responses, rules that could be exploited. A perfect place to send a message. A deafening crack split the air as the front window finally shattered. Not from a bullet, from something heavier. A vehicle engine roared. "They're ramming the perimeter!" someone shouted. Sandro's phone vibrated once in his hand. He glanced down, then looked up, expression turning lethal in its calm. "They're done," he said. Sarah stared at him. "What?" "They wanted panic," Sandro continued. "They wanted you reacting." He stepped closer to Elena, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "This is why I said you're not safe inside their walls," he murmured. "Because walls don't stop men who don't care about consequences." Outside, sirens wailed. Too many, overlapping, disorganized. Cameras flashed as bystanders filmed the chaos on their phones. Public, loud, messy. Sandro turned to Ruiz. "Clear a path to the rear exit. Now." Ruiz hesitated. "We can't just—" Another explosion, smaller, sharper, cut him off. Sandro didn't raise his voice. "If you keep her here," he said evenly, "they will escalate until someone dies in front of your doors." Silence. Ruiz looked at Elena, shaking, pale, terrified, but still standing. Then he nodded once. "Rear exit!" he barked. "Now!" Officers moved. The station groaned under the weight of chaos pressing in from every side. And Elena understood with terrifying clarity that neutrality had been an illusion. The law hadn't been chosen as sanctuary. It had been chosen as bait. And the only reason she was still breathing was because the man she'd been running from had already recognized the trap. The rear hallway smelled like dust and old paint. It wasn't meant for civilians. No posters, no polished floors, no comforting signs pointing the way. Just concrete walls, emergency lighting, and the echo of boots moving with purpose. Elena walked between Sarah Coleman and Alessandro Moretti, her heart still pounding from the chaos erupting beyond the station walls. Sirens wailed outside, rising and falling like a warning song the city had learned to ignore. Somewhere near the front entrance, glass crunched underfoot and voices shouted orders that no longer sounded certain. This was not surrender. She held on to that thought with both hands. Sarah stopped near the steel exit door, one hand on the handle. She looked at Elena, eyes sharp but softened by something close to regret. "I can still keep you here," Sarah said. "We can move you through federal channels by morning." Elena met her gaze. "And how many people get hurt while the paperwork catches up?" Sarah didn't answer. Sandro stood just behind Elena, not touching, not pushing, waiting. The choice was still hers. "I didn't leave with him because I was scared," Elena said quietly. I stayed with him because I understand what's happening. Sarah exhaled slowly. You understand that this means you won't be invisible anymore. Elena nodded. I was never invisible. I was just alone. Sarah's jaw tightened. She glanced at Sandro. If anything happens to her, it won't, Sandro said calmly. Not a promise. A statement. Sarah opened the door. Cool night air rushed in, sharp with exhaust and rain. The alley beyond was narrow, dimly lit, lined with unmarked vehicles positioned with deliberate precision. Men moved quietly, no shouting, no panic, each one aware of Elena without staring, their focus outward, on angles and threats. The contrast was jarring. Inside the station, chaos, noise, flashing lights. Outside, control. Sandro stepped forward first, scanning the street with practiced ease. He gave a subtle nod. It's clear, he said. Elena took one step, then another. The door closed behind her with a heavy metallic thud. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing in the night, grounding herself in the feel of pavement beneath her feet and rain misting her skin. This wasn't escape. It was transition. Sandro turned toward her, expression unreadable in the low light. You don't owe me anything, he said. You made your choice. Elena met his gaze steadily. So did you. A car door opened nearby. An engine purred to life. Elena looked back once, at the police station, lights flashing red and blue against shattered glass. A place that had felt safe until it became a target. Sarah stood just inside the doorway, watching. Their eyes met. Sarah gave a small nod. Not approval. Understanding. Elena turned away. As she walked toward the waiting car, something inside her finally settled. 5 years ago, she'd run believing safety meant distance. Tonight, she understood it meant alignment. The car door opened and Sandro held it, not like a jailer, not like a rescuer. Like a man acknowledging her decision. As she slid into the seat, she felt the weight of the world shift, not onto her shoulders, but off them. The engine pulled away smoothly, merging into the city's flow as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Elena knew better. She rested her head back against the seat, eyes closing briefly. Not in fear, not in exhaustion, in resolve. She hadn't chosen Sandro because he was powerful. She'd chosen him because when danger came for her, he didn't ask her to be brave. He stood in front of it. And for the first time since she ran, Elena understood the truth she'd been avoiding all along. Safety was never a place. It was the man willing to walk her out alive,